I guess you are one of the best kayakers in the world, which is and not only that, you're doing like incredible expeditions to these really remote places, some trips that have never been done before, often solo, so you're on your own. So like what drives you? What do you like most about all this stuff you're doing right now?
Ooh. I guess because I started kayaking in the club, and then I was like a pure product of like the French social system and the club system, and then got into federation competing, and I always had like kind of this control. And eventually I got kicked out because I was too slow and too old.
Okay.
So that was like 1.5, 2 years ago, I think.
Yeah.
And it's hard when you're like get kicked out because you're not good enough. It's kind of hurts. But it was one of the best things because I am now fully able to just choose and pick my own projects and work towards them, and I think the freedom of just like choosing fully what you want to do these days is something that I really enjoy. But I
Yeah.
would have not made the move by myself. I kind of needed to
Right.
get kicked out. It's kind of hard to do something for your entire life and then scary to stop and do
Wow.
something else.
So let's talk about that a little bit more. So getting kicked out, you're talking about like competitive slalom, whitewater kayaking.
Yeah.
And so you were competing at a high level in that, and then basically, literally, they kicked you out, or they basically you didn't have a place on the national team.
Uh, well, both. Like I think I didn't necessarily deserve to stay on the training program anymore. So slalom is an Olympic discipline, and we get fundings from the government and everything, and that really helped me um, in my teenage years and early adult years, because that's how I could um, pretty much make a living and be able to go to university and not have to get another side job because I had this money from sport
Yeah,
performance thing. Uh, and it pretty much
sure.
founded my creaking trips too because
Right.
I had extra money and I would just go like paddle places.
Yeah.
Um, and I got injured, and I had a really rough year on a personal level in 2015, and
Okay.
then I never really came back. um I don't think it's because of the shoulder injury, or I think I just didn't have it in me. Like I was not like I thought I was motivated, but maybe I wasn't.
Yeah.
And then coming back from a shoulder injury takes time uh,
How's your shoulder doing
to
now?
go fast. Super good. The one
Yeah.
I had surgery on is so much better than the other one. It's really stable. I trust it. I
No
never
problems.
have problem. I only have problems with the one I didn't have surgery on.
Okay.
Had a Yeah, we have like the doctors that have been um taking care of that have been really really good. So
Yeah.
I'm not. I feel very lucky to be French.
Yeah.
We have
Right.
a good. We still have a good medical system and healthcare and free education. So
Right.
that's definitely something I
Cool.
really value and cherish.
Cool. Okay, let's back up a little more because I think this is interesting for people to hear like how you got to where you are now in boating. So, what is that? So, like when did you start kayaking? How old were you?
I was 5 years old.
5 years old. And that
Uh,
was part of you were talking about the club system?
yeah. So
And the
some
club
of my
system and
dad's friend were kayaking. My
yeah,
parents are not kayaking.
yeah.
Imagine my 3-year-old self,
Yeah.
a big Playmobil fan,
Okay.
like a little bit paranoid with Playmobil toys.
Okay.
And they come with a plastic kayak that is the same color of my Playmobil car, this
Okay.
blue and super ugly yellow Eskimo kayak. And I'm
Okay.
like, this is the coolest Playmobil I've ever seen. I want to do that. So I asked my parents, hey, I want to do this thing. And they're like, oh, you want to kayak? But no, you don't know how to swim. So they said no, and I want to do it even more. So
Yeah.
club system being awesome, I joined a swim club. I learned how to swim, and by the end of the summer, I come back with the swimming certificate with the like yellow golden duck on it, and it says I can swim.
Oh,
And my dad had never paddled. My parents had a business, which is cano blaireau.
what's that?
A blaireau is like a beater, and a cano is like a dinghy, like a inflatable tubing thing.
Okay.
And they didn't know how to kayak, but they set up a business of like tubbing
On a river.
in the local river.
Okay.
They just started just as friends, and everyone wanted to do it. So
What
then
river? Like, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Val d'Isère, so
Okay.
it's
What
the
part of
river
France?
right in town, in the Alps. It
Okay.
goes under a tunnel. It's super sketchy.
Yeah.
Like they were a little bit crazy, but because they didn't know better.
Yeah.
Um,
So
and in
people would come
order,
and rent tubes and go down the river.
yeah, but then they had to hire someone that knew what they were doing because that was their law in France. So
Yeah.
that's how they knew people that kayaked. And they came, I saw the thing, they said no, I learned how to swim in the swimming club. And when I came back with the paper, they didn't feel like saying no. So
Right.
they drove me to the local club, which was like further down in the valley, like a 40-minute drive almost, like depending on how bad the road is and if you're stuck behind a tourist in his camper van or not.
Right.
And I started kayaking and competing because French club being founded by public money, you
Yeah.
need to compete, you know, between the kayaking club and the theater and the gymnastics and the skiing. And so the way the club get the founding is like we have that many kids, and because
Right.
kayaking will never have as many kids as judo or whatever,
Yeah.
then the results are counting. So all the clubs are like putting the kids into the races because, oh, but we have 4 regional champion and this person in first division. So you just start racing. And then I continued racing. At first, it's just like for the presents. I was just stoked to go to a race and get some free goodies,
Yeah.
candies and bank branded fanny pack and all sorts of really ugly, useless things that I loved because, like most 5-year-old kids, I had really bad taste.
Yeah.
Still do, probably. And then I continued with the sport because I started actually loving it once I learned how to roll.
Were you 100% athletic kid, or obviously you're like a natural athlete, but were you also into like academics growing up, or what else were you doing?
I grew up in a really, I think, a very, very privileged place for a kid to grow up because I grew up in the mountains, in between two very, very good French ski resorts. So I actually started skiing, and then we didn't really watch TV or do those things. We just would go and play outside, and I would go hang out with my neighbor who is a farmer, and he had sheep, and just play with bikes and run outside, climb, um,
Cool.
just play.
And when you were like in high school, how serious was the club thing? Was it year round, multiple days a week?
Um, I started training every day when I was 15, I'd say. In secondary school, I was in a sport class, so I had free time off school to go to the club.
Right.
So then I was able to train maybe 2 full afternoon every week, and then 2 evenings, and then weekends. So you're almost training like full time. But then when I was in high school, the slalom course was literally a 3-minute walk from the boarding
Wow.
school I was with.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much when I first started paddling alone, because the coach would come most days, and then I was in a special outdoor class, so I had extra outdoor credits for we went caving, skatering. It was really cool. But then I started paddling alone because I wanted to train more. So I left my boat at the other local club who
Yeah.
was kind enough to just leave me their keys. And so I could get out of the dorm at 6:45, and I had to be in class at 8. So I would just like run, grab some sort of bread for breakfast, go kayaking for 40 minutes, and
Yeah.
run back to class just miserable, wet, and eating my breakfast in the
Yeah.
classroom when it wasn't allowed, but it was tolerated because the teachers, they're like, oh, she just went kayaking. Poor thing. Look how cold she is. and and that's when
And
I
so,
started being really serious about it.
yeah. And you were alone, like nobody else on the river?
So most session I had people, like
Yeah.
I had a coach and a group, and we all do training groups, but because I wanted to paddle more and every day, I had sessions where I was totally alone on the class 2 free, and I had my training program and I would just do it. And then in university, I had to paddle alone because I didn't choose to do like sports science or like an open university.
Yeah.
I was in political science,
Okay.
which is a selective course. So you get good grades and you're selected, and sports helped me. But then I had to go to classes. I couldn't skip class. And
Right.
so the training with the federation is like 10 o'clock or 3 o'clock. And I never had this time frame to go.
Because
So
you were pretty
sometimes
dedicated to your studies as well.
that was the deal. No
Yeah.
study, no kayaking.
Right.
Because my
With
parents, they don't care about the kayaking. My mom,
okay.
I think she doesn't like kayaking. She
Okay.
hates kayaking. My dad paddles for fun with his friends.
Yeah.
They just go camping. But like the deal was like, as long as you don't have behavior problems
Yeah.
and good grades, you will be able to go to the club and go kayaking.
Okay.
If you don't pass exams and or you have any problem, then no kayaking.
Did they ever at any point realize how big a passion it was of yours and get fully supportive? Or were they did they see that at a certain age, like you were wanting to compete and all of that?
Um, I think they've always been really supportive, and the way it works is like the club will take your kid, but they also need volunteers.
Yeah.
So some trips I would go without the parents, but some trips my parents would come and help because the coaches there need to be on the river, and then it's nice if like the parents come and help cooking or setting up the tents. So I think even when it wasn't that serious, they were always really committed and supportive and helped and put in some work. And then when I got better um, and older, I wanted to start freestyle, but the clubs that don't do freestyle or river running because it's plastic boating and
Right.
because if you're a real kayaker, you paddle carbon. But I kind of wanted to do it, and my parents have been really supportive in that regards because they drove me when the
Yeah.
club wasn't doing the things. And I think one of the main reason my mom was like that supportive of plastic boating is because she's not really into competition, and plastic boating was fun. It
Right.
was leisure, whereas like competing, I was crazy. Like
Yeah.
I would lose the race at 10 years old, and I would cry for like the whole drive back, like a 4-hour drive. And my mom told me like she was just like hoping that I would just lose more races so I would learn.
Right.
And she was actually really happy when I did that. which seems a little bit weird, but I kind of understand.
So when
And
did you start running like harder river running outside of
really late.
yeah.
Like in France is like it's not like in the US where it's cool to have your kid run class 4. And
Yeah.
you're like, yeah, my kid is the youngest kid who has run the goalie.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that's I think it's a cultural difference where in France is really bad. So I would just go on rivers with my dad and his friends, And I remember they would take me on Mastalon, which is like class 4, but then they would force me to portage all the hard rapids, and I was
Right.
just live. And so the
Yeah.
way I would go on rivers, it was cool because it was like I would get to go out on weekends and go camping,
Yeah.
which was nice. And they would even let me drink beers or like some of it. I felt like I was part of like the grown up, and I was like this 13-year-old like little idiotic kid, I would say. And then they just put me on live bait all the hard rapids and forced me to portage. And they taught me how to do the spider jump, which is probably a safety technique you don't know.
Okay.
You're
What did you say? They put you on what at every
on live
rapid?
bait.
Live bait?
Yeah, like you're clipped to the rope and yeah.
In
Yeah.
order to get you down
No,
sections.
to catch them whenever they would
Okay, on
swim, because
safety.
they
On
swim
safety.
all the time.
Okay, okay.
And in France, we love ropes.
Right.
Like clip to the diver is something really big. People like I would go back home and I'd be like, okay, let's just have someone in the pool in their kayak, and they're like, no, we need someone clipped to the rope. Like it's some sort of like almost conception of safety that's different depending on where you paddle, which is really funny to watch. But so they taught me the spider jump. You jump, you spread your arms and your feet, you jump really on the person, like you just slam them, and once you touch them, you just close everything and you're close, and someone pulls you up. Works really well when you're 13. When you turn 17, you tend to hurt people a little bit more, and they're not happy.
So any swimmer in your dad's crew got jumped on and rescued by you? Yeah. And one of the other adults was belaying you.
Holding the rope, yeah.
Yeah. Awesome.
So, spider jumps for years.
Yeah.
I'm glad this is over. And then they just forced me to portage everything, and I was like just getting really frustrated by the time I was 15, because I really wanted to run those rapids. I could see a line, but they're like, no, you portage. And they're like, you'll make your own decisions when you're 18 and not under our responsibility. And then Jules Domine came, and he's 1 year younger than me. Super talented French paddler. He lives in BC and Colombia now. And he was allowed to run the rapids. And I was like, well, if he runs it, I want to be able to run it. And my dad's friend, they were not too keen, and I just called them out on being sexist. And then they were like a little bit shocked, but they didn't want to say no, because that's true that they let that boy run the rapid, but they wouldn't let me run the rapid.
Right.
Although we were the same age, like similar skill level. And so I ran the rapid with my dad's friend. One of them had a super gnarly swim, and I got him out. And so after this, because I had run the rapid with a good line and rescued him at the same time, I was allowed to do whatever I wanted.
Right. Awesome. You're growing up, you're a teenager, you're competing, I guess, at that point a lot in the club. And then I'd imagine you started going and running rivers with friends on the side, or not until you were 18?
I started just kind of going with my dad and his friends. And then I got lucky because I met people. I met the right people. In my kayaking, I met a lot of like great people at the right time, and they've helped me so much. So I have Nico Chassin, who's one of the best freestyle French paddler at the time, joined my club. And then he's like, oh, you should go to this freestyle competition. And then he had kids camp, and he's like, oh, come to the kids camp. And then I was lucky because I started quicking away from my dad and his friends. And it was very different in terms of like, even just safety. So I paddled a lot as a kid with Nico and Deb Pinniger.
Oh yeah, I know Deb. Yeah.
So, and Deb is probably one of the best person to learn kayaking from, in terms of safety and making decisions and just paddling. And so
hilarious,
I got to paddle a lot with Deb. Wow, so much fun. We had so much fun.
Great.
And then I did freestyle.
You were
And
saying safety was different. Why? In what sense?
well, so they're not always attached to having someone on a rope,
Right.
like they actually use throw bag like as something you throw,
Right.
which was a big difference I feel with what I had seen so far, and also rescuing from the boat.
Okay, let's talk about some. Let's skip to the present. What are some expeditions that you can talk about that are memorable, or that really stand out in your last little bit, your last few years, or even your last few months that are good, worth sharing?
I think I have a really, really special place in my heart for Argentina. We've been doing 3 big expeditions there. We first went on to try to explore the Upper Atuel
Okay.
Valley, and we mostly hiked. It was we didn't paddle that much, but it was just like this really stunning remote place, and the paddling we did was good. A lot of hiking, not
Cool.
enough food. The
Not
Argentinian I was with tried to starve us. He's
right.
very fit, and he's like this machine that just can keep going. Matias Lopez, superhuman like guy, and none of us were like that strong. So at some point, we're just looking at each other like, "Oh my god, I'm so hungry." And so we're like the 3 youngest, were like, "Oh, me too. I'm so hungry." And we're just like kind of complaining and be like, "Well, okay, let's keep going." And we don't want to tell Matias and Ben because we're just like, "Oh, we're just too weak, and those guys are machines, and we don't want to annoy them." And we reached the top of this hike, and it was our second river. So we'd hike for 3 days and spend another full fourth day hiking. And we get to the top, and we reach this base camp from the gauchos that we're just using their tents because we asked them and they're fine with it. And then we just arrive at 3 o'clock, and everyone's just passed out sleeping, just really tired. And at some point, Ben wakes up and he comes back with like a pack of rice and a bottle of mayo that's not ours. And he's like, "I don't care what you guys say. I found this. I'm gonna steal this because I can't even sleep. I'm so hungry. And we're gonna cook rice and mayo." And then with the other young kid, Matias is not impressed because for him it's stealing, and we kind
Yeah.
of stealing, the leftover food of the gauchos. Um, and then we gave them alcohol after and apologized, and they're just laughing. But then
Right.
with the 2 other kids, we're like, "Oh my god, yes, we're not the only hungry ones. We've been talking about food for the last day and a half." So that was one good trip. And then we went on the Rio Upper Diamante,
Okay.
which was it was a 5-day expedition.
When
And
was when were these trips?
so those two were in 2017, end
Okay.
of 2017. Uh, and this was an amazing trip. Although I had a super gnarly swim on day one. We're paddling, and it's mank, and it's getting cold, and my shoes not super tight, but the lace are still on, and I'm like, "Oh, it's too cold. My fingers are cold. I just don't bother trying to tie my shoes proper." I'm like,
Hmm.
it's okay. We're not really like scouting anything. Next thing you know, I'm like pinned,
Hmm.
like fully pinned, vertical, water all over my neck. And Matthias and Ben are ahead, and Robert stopped at the last minute and decided to scout because he's just like, this is stupid. Uh, and then he sees me when he got back to his boat, and in the meantime I got pinned, and so he's paddling down, and he's just going right towards where I got pinned. And the fact that I was pinned, he didn't get pinned because he got on the side. And before that, I was just screaming, "Matthias, Ben!" But they didn't hear me. So Robert is like bombing down to those guys to tell them I need help. And they come back up. And I've clipped my boat, but I tried to unjam myself, and I'm like suddenly like a little bit more water over my head, and it's really not that great. And Ben gets there. I throw him the line that's clipped onto my boat, and he ties it to a rope, and then we're like, okay, what do we do? And he's like, you want to hang on? And I tried to get the boat out, and I've been pinned for 4 minutes already, and I'm like, no, I want to get out.
Yeah.
So I give him my watershed, and he helps me out with the safety. Him and Robert are like together, like pulling me out, and I got out, and I'm like in the riverbed in the rocks, and then we try to unjam my boat, but it's really stuck. And next thing you know, my foot slides in between rocks, and I get foot entrapment, and I just freak out instantly. Like it's not even that much current, but I'm like in the mindset where I'm just like freaking out. So I pull my foot as fast as I can, and I lose my shoe on day one of the 5-day expedition. And then I'm just like, I am such an idiot, because I remember being like, I'll be fine. I don't need to tie my shoelace that well. And not having a shoe on a trip is, I never thought about it, but it's super stupid.
Right.
You can't really scout, you can't really set safety. It's dangerous to run the rapids, it's dangerous to portage them. Like I never really thought about it, but it's super bad. Luckily, Ben is the only person I know that brings Kim shoes.
Okay.
So he has like flip-flops, and we strap a flip-flop and duct tape it, and it's really uncomfortable, but like we keep going down. I'm really close to hypothermia. We make a fire. All the boys are around me trying to get me warm. And the next day we start paddling again, and we break a boat. Takes forever to fix it. It's really cold. The boat breaks again, and we just don't make any progress. And at some point, Ben is just like, that's why it's so good to go with Ben on trips, because he knows better than everyone else in the trip. Everyone would be like, come on, we have to make a push. And Ben's like, let's just stop here. This is stupid. We'll figure out later. We'll spend one more day. Like, stop.
Yeah.
And so we stop in this place, and the gauchos, they do pile rocks when they travel with the horses. And so you don't have as much wind, and it's not as cold. So we go in one of those places, and a few minutes later, my friend Robert shows up with a shoe. And he had found a shoe in a pile of trash that the gaucho left. And the shoe is really big, but it has shrunk. So it's like the right foot, right size, all beat up. And so I spend the whole evening tying the soil in the shoe together with like whichever pieces of metal and plastic thing I could find. So I was like just fixing my shoe every day. Make it more solid. And so at the end, I had like my paddling shoe on my left foot and this like super beat up special rocker caterpillar shoe. And it had some really good grip. I was impressed.
Nice.
And so we finished the trip, and I could run everything and portage safely because we somehow found a shoe in the middle of nowhere.
That's awesome. What was the river called again?
That's the Upper Diamante. It's near Medoza.
Near Medoza. And the other one was the Atuel?
Atuel, yeah.
And that's where?
Also in the same area in the Medoza, San Rafael.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. And so those were some of like your earlier multi-days at that level, would you say?
I think it was my first trips with Ben.
Okay. And this is Ben Stooksbury?
Stooksbury.
Okay. And it sounds like you learned a lot from those trips too. Tie your shoes.
I think for me, getting to paddle with Ben or Boomer is really like, I'm really lucky.
Yeah. Because
they know what they're doing and they're so good at it, and the fact that they're willing to have me in the group, I just learned so much from them.
Right. And that idea of just like stopping at that point.
Yeah, the idea of just stopping, or sometimes like it's the opposite, you know, sometimes you're too tired and Boomer's like, nope, we're doing 40 minutes on. 10 minutes off, 40 minutes on, and it will try to like force a pace when you would just be like really slugging otherwise, or force breaks, or I don't know. They're just really good people to go kayaking with.
Too.
Yeah.
And so, okay. And how about what about something more recent?
Something really recent.
Yeah.
Well, this year I went to Patagonia. Well, no, first I went to Argentina with Ben again to do this other river in the same area, the Rio Tunuyan, high water. We completed the river, but it was a disaster because it was high, and the crew, we didn't really know each other, and they were not really prepared. And so it was kind of scary to see that one of them didn't have a dry suit. The kayaking was a little bit like sketchy, and then it got really a little bit like stressed out.
Yeah.
And I think also like I'm not really good at this, because when I feel like the trip leader is not making good decision, I will just kind of just take over.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't, not thinking it's a problem, but I would just go in the lead and start eddy catching to make progress. And I think that wasn't so good, because you don't really want this small girl kind of in the lead when you're a little bit macho. But maybe I think I'll keep an open mind. Like, in a lot of ways, he was right, and in a lot of ways, I wish I had been able to just be a little bit more calm and composed, and make him believe that it was taking the decisions, and just let him to take the decisions I wanted him to take, instead of just going like straight into conflict. And I wasn't like, I am not chill. Like, I will get in fights, and I will call people out when I feel like it. And sometimes I should really just say nothing, but I think French people are a little bit like this, where we're just like, we're not happy with something, we'll go in the street and we'll demonstrate,
Right.
or we'll call people out, or we'll be moody. Whereas, like, I feel like North American, you guys have this ability to be a little bit more like, it's okay, even if you don't think it's okay. And I think I need to. I'm working on this. It's definitely like some of the things that you need to work on, because it's important on those trips.
Yeah. Is that something with, like, you were saying the behavior was kind of macho and not considering your opinion as much because you're a woman? Is that something you encounter in a lot of paddling circles still?
I thought it was over. And I, like, for a couple years, like before this year, I was like, no, this is over. It's so much better than when I started, because when I started, it was obviously like I couldn't run rapids because I was a girl, but then a boy would show up and it was no longer a problem. And I had to call people out to go. Or I'd be with my dad trying to bum a shuttle on my local river that I've done 500 times or more. And we'd be like, oh, you guys going down? Can we come with you? We don't have shuttle. And the guy would be like, well, is she going to be okay? And at this time, I'm like in the French national slalom team. I'm running class 5 with confidence. I can do freestyle. And my dad is a beater.
Yeah.
And at no point, no, but my dad is swimming. He has the worst roll ever.
Yeah.
Like, it's like he pulls his head out first,
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
sometimes it snaps the hips and he makes
Yeah.
it, but most of the time he swims. It's like kind
Yeah.
of 50-50. But he's having a great time, and
Yeah, you're getting this.
that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
But at no point he questioned if my dad was good enough.
Right.
And I'm just like, well, this is I know it doesn't mean bad, and I know maybe he's preoccupied, but this is fundamentally sexist.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you tell that story, you're a feminist hysteric person. Because but they're so annoying with like claiming things. It's not like this, and I feel like for me in the last couple years, it wasn't like this because I no longer have to prove anything. I have a shiny as Red Bull helmet on my head, and it changed the way people see me. I'm like they know who I am, so I'm not like the little typical kayaker girl that I used to be. So I think I wasn't confronted to sexism as much. Um, and this year, for the first time in a long time, I actually had like moments where I'm like, oh my god, this is this is not okay. And like super sexist comments, or you travel with boys and they will stop randomly to pee, and you're like, sweet, we're in a foreign country. You guys can pee everywhere. There's no spot for me to pee. And they just don't care. And you tell them and they just don't care. And they make super sexist, degraded comments as jokes because, like you put shitty boys together and they have like this grommet attitude and they think they're funny and they're trying to like kind of affirm their manhood and look cool, and you're like, oh, you're this is actually a super gnarly sexist comment. And I would just, all I wanted to do is just like scream, and then at some point I was like, this is useless. And luckily I had like one of the boy or two of the boy that were like very much aware of like what is sexist and what is not, and how uncomfortable that would make me feel. And I would just look at them and they'd just be like giving me the look like, we know, it's okay, like, sorry. And they would kind of just apologize for those other guys that it's it's not even their fault. They're just unaware, and it's so socially anchored in how they grew up and their entourage that they're not bad people. They're just not even aware. um And I mean, same for women. Like some of the most sexist people I know in the kayaking world are women, you know?
How
And
so?
I think if you reproduce gender stereotypes without even being aware of it, and if you wear like all pink and all purple and you're not really like, that's socially constructed.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're Barbie and you act like a Barbie and you don't have the critical thinking and the tools to think, oh, I'm actually like using my femininity, or if you're posing and having bikini shots and not fully aware that this is objectification of women, um, well, then you're probably the most sexist person in this industry. If you do the exact same thing and you're aware of it, you know, then you're actually able to do that. Um, but I still think kayaking is a male dominated sport. There is sexism, but it's not necessarily just like one person said that and this person is sexist. It's way deeper and it's more anchored. And whether it's male or female, everyone is kind of responsible. Also, everyone sees feminism in different way. Like
Yeah.
I am so against girls only thing.
Girls
Like
on what?
the girls only programs.
Right. Okay.
This is for me and my vision of feminism, and I am a feminist,
Yeah.
even if that's negative for some people. Yeah, I'm one of those annoying person. But I don't share that vision because I think this is creating a differentiation, and my vision of feminism is more towards mixity and not like exclusion. And I think sometimes as a woman you're being excluded or put aside or put apart in those sports, and I don't see why you do the exact same thing with boys. if we have a good day on the river, we're not gonna do a girls only river day. If one of our friends is a guy and he wants to come, please come. And kids camp, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
But
what about I totally hear what you're saying. What about like youth programs though? Do you think that there's a place for like all young women's programs, with the argument being like allowing that space where some of those pressures don't necessarily exist?
Actually, I think the opposite. If there is a place for a women's only program, it would be for older women. Because I think if you promote something equal and maybe gender equality at a younger age, and you start not making any difference between the boys and the girls while you teach them paddling at a young age, that's the best thing you could do as a coach. And I think it's hard, and I think I'm aware of it, and I even do it when I coach kids, is sometimes I'm going to be a little bit more cautious with the little girls, where maybe I'll help them more to carry their boats, or where the little boys, I'm like, unconsciously, I'm like, they're tough, they can deal with that. And then the like more tiny girl, I'm just gonna be like, you okay, you're not too cold. And I think it's really hard to stop doing that, but you have to. And what I try to do is get them to help each other.
Yeah.
And then that's fine, because I don't get involved and they team up and two people carry a boat. But I think if you don't make any difference, then you don't have this thing where little girls are usually more careful and more scared than boys.
Yeah.
And then they're just going as hard and they're just as good, which is really cool to see.